All right, guys. Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Results Loading Podcast hosted by Prosperous AI. I'm your host, Michael Atkin, and today we are exploring the world of pre-construction leadership with an industry powerhouse in Sue Badacharji. Sue is the director of pre-construction at Gilbane Building Company, bringing decades of experience managing complex, high-stakes projects across life sciences, technology, data centers, hospitality, and healthcare sectors. She is known for her ability to lead teams, drive value engineering, and deliver successful projects, earning a stellar reputation for getting things done no matter what. With a career spanning top firms like DPR Construction, Herrero Builders, and UCSF Helen Diller Hospital, Sue has played a critical and crucial role in shaping the future of construction planning as well as execution. I will let her tell you all about this herself. Just wanted to set the table and say, Sue, welcome. Thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show today. We're really looking forward to this one.
Thanks, Michael. All right. Yes. Sue Badacharji, been in the industry for a long time. The construction industry is a really fun industry because you can be playing multiple roles and you don't know where you might end up. And that's who I am. I started out in the field, in Salinas, doing a Salinas Valley Memorial Hospital retrofit, where I was told, Sue, you'll be there for 9 months. And lo and behold, 3 years later, I was still there, building out there in Salinas. And, my career went from there to the San Francisco Air Traffic Control Tower, where I did a bunch of work there building that. And that is another one that I feel really proud of, to have been there, done that. And from there, I went to Lucille Packard Children's Hospital, in Palo Alto, and then more recently the UCSF Parnassus Heights Helen Diller Hospital, where I was playing the role of the precon director on that as well. So it's been a nice ride, Michael, I would definitely say, and my transition from the field to pre-construction, I'll talk about more through the rest of this podcast.
Awesome. Yeah, no, fantastic. And thank you, Sue, for helping me kind of set the table here for what is to come. Obviously, an illustrious journey thus far, and looking forward to diving into it a little bit deeper here. So, Sue, to get started, if you wouldn't mind kind of telling us or breaking down what inspired this career journey at all. I mean, what inspired you to pursue a career in construction, specifically pre-construction? Take us back to the beginning and break down for us really the genesis of your story and how we got here today.
All right. So I'm going to go a little back, really back. Okay. So
Sure.
I grew up in India. Our family was me, my dad, mom, and my sister. My dad's a mechanical engineer. My sister's a chemical engineer. So guess what? What did I do? I became a civil engineer. We were just probably thinking, what if we were to build a company and have like a factory, right? What would we need? And maybe that's how I ended up in civil engineering. I really was, at that time in the industry, a lot of kids who graduated during my time from India, they're all computer engineers and they would write code. But I was more interested in the built environment because I was like, if I don't see what I'm doing, like a sine wave or a cos wave or, more scientific things, I was not in it. I wouldn't believe it because I didn't really see it, right? So
Right.
here I go. I'm like, I want to see whatever I do. I want to see that building, go up. And that's how I ended up in civil engineering. And then I came to Texas A&M, did my master's in construction management. And then, we all hear about the Reno competition. That's where I got recruited to come work in the Bay Area. And then I've been here ever since. So that's really me getting out there, choosing the field of civil engineering, and then ending up on a job site, initial part of my career. And from there, it's very interesting because, you do the same, you do the realms of like field engineer, office engineer, job engineer, project manager. You get through those roles, in Hansel Phelps, you become a superintendent, or assist your superintendent, and you end up knowing everything about the schedule and more. And so from there, I went and I was a project manager for a bit. And during that time, one of my precon managers in the company I was working with at that time was DPR, and she came by and she said, Sue, how about you try some estimating? You know, we were between projects. I had helped the team put some estimates together and she loved it. And I was like, estimator? No, you know what does everybody think? An estimator is somebody with glasses sitting at the desk crunching
Yeah,
numbers.
the numbers,
Oh,
yeah.
it's gloomy and grumpy, most probably. So I was like, no, no ways I'm going to do estimating, right? And she's like, no, it's really fun. And I was like, I don't know, you got to sell it harder. And she did. She said, Sue, as an estimator or pre-con manager, you will control the destiny of the job. You will be the person who puts the plan together that people will end up building, and you'll get alignment from your superintendent and your project managers, and you'll set that destiny for that project. Now, in my head, I was like, okay, maybe, I don't know. She said, okay, just 6 months and then you can go back. And I'm talking about like 2014, 2015, right?
Yeah.
So here I am, 6 months later, now 10 years later, and I'm like, I'm never going back, right? Um, One of the things she told me, and I really believe it, is when you're in pre-construction, you're in the honeymoon phase of the job. The clients love you, the subcontractors are building a relationship with you.
It's
Everybody's your
exciting.
best friend. Yep. Yep. And then I was like, oh my God, when I was in operations, it was not always a smooth ride, right? We would have to have tough conversations with the client, with the subcontractor. No matter what, something would not work out. And so always you are in that situation where you are ready to have that conversation. In pre-construction, given the type of projects that I've worked on, 9 out of 10 times, it's all about transparency and being open, and the industry has changed as well. So instead of doing just lump sum hard bids, we are doing more, collaborative type of delivery systems such as IPDI, FOA, design build GMPs. And with that kind of change, the industry has changed so much. So I really think, like, I know you asked me the question, like, why pre-construction? But because of all those reasons above, right? It's the whole transition, right?
Yeah, and some of the best roles end up being the ones that you fall into or the ones that you least expect to be really terrific. And you're not only able to utilize your skill set, but you're actually doing something that you like. Initially you're like, I don't want to do computer science. I don't want to just be sitting there coding. Similar to, I don't want to do estimating. I don't want to be crunching numbers in some cave somewhere. And that sounds terrible. That's not what Sue is supposed to be doing. And then all of a sudden it's like, honeymoon phase all the time. Everyone's getting along. It's exciting. We don't have any issues yet. We don't have any work stoppages. We're not over budget when I'm in charge. And, things aren't that bad. Plus, I get to use my engineering mind. I get to see the result because, like you said, I'm setting the table and really determining the destiny of an entire project. This is pretty good for what I wanted to be doing, even though I didn't quite know it yet at the beginning.
Yep, yep, exactly. And now I always tell a lot of young people when they're coming into the industry, I tell them this is like the best kept secret of the construction industry. Like pre-construction is the underdog. Nobody talks about it, nobody thinks about it. But initially I would say a good chatty estimator makes a good pre-con manager, right? Because they know the numbers and then they can present to the client and do all that, and they can do the buyout. And here we are, trying to talk about pre-con, it's now a legit field as opposed to being like an estimator who has BD skills to go out there and talk about the estimate. So there we go.
Exactly. Yeah, it's funny you mentioned the chatty aspect because actually a few weeks ago I had another director of pre-construction for a large construction company here in Colorado who was also a woman and had a similar story to you, which is funny because she's quite chatty and she was like, I want to be able to talk. I don't want to do estimating. I don't want to do the numbers thing. It's like the same thing like we said about the coding in the dark all day. That is not my shtick. And her mentor was the one who was like, you need to try this. And then like 20 years later, she's still doing it. And she said something similar to you. It's the best kept secret. It is literally the best job in the whole company, and nobody talks about it. She had a mechanical engineering background as well. And it's funny hearing you talk about it being in a similar role to her because it's so identical. And there's such like a passion for the advantages of being in the position that you're in. I can go and do the face-to-face stuff. I control the destiny of the project, and I'm using my engineering mind. It's like a win-win-win for me, and I would have had no idea had someone not kind of pushed me into the role. Because back then, it really was if it's still a good kept secret now, several years ago, it really was a secondary thing, if you will, to your point. So it's funny hearing you guys pretty much say the same exact thing about precon, if you will.
Yep.
Yeah, so Sue, you've worked across major industries like we discussed in healthcare, life sciences, data centers. How is pre-construction varying across these sectors? Is there a similar common denominator at the end of the day? It's construction no matter what, or are there different hoops you have to be jumping through depending on the sector? Obviously, to an extent, in terms of compliance and standardization and whatnot. But talk to us a little bit about dealing with various sectors and having to deal with them as unique individual industries as well.
So in California, healthcare, for example, has different requirements as opposed to the rest of the country. So the healthcare industry, because of OSHPOD and HGI, is a lot more advanced in the way it does procurement compared to, say, a data center or a life science sector project. The main reason being here in healthcare, what the teams have realized over time is, design build and the ability to work with your subcontractors in the same room give a lot of benefit as opposed to finishing the design and going back to them and saying, hey, go build this because of the OSHPOD and HGI requirements within projects. So healthcare, for example, has, I would say, one of the most advanced ways of delivering projects as opposed to, the data center deliveries or the life science projects. Now, on the other side of things, it's also driven by clients. Now, a lot of the clients that are in healthcare, I would name like Sutter, UCSF, Kaiser, they all have been there in this market for a long time, and they have seen the advantages and disadvantages of lump sum procurement. So for them to go in a project and say, oh, we're just going to award it to the lowest contractor has not worked out enough number of times. And that's why they have more of a collaborative, type of structure. Now, healthcare also tries to have unique designs depending on the size of the project and how, magnanimous it can be, right? You're building all these big hospitals in different parts of the state, and they have different designs, which cause them to get very, very creative on how we want to deliver and how you can blend the design with the engineering aspects of the whole facility, right? How you end up delivering. Now, typically, a data center doesn't need to look pretty. It's all about the engineering phenomenon in there. And
Yep.
for some of the big tech companies, they are now even controlling the design because they have in-house design teams that manage the design so closely that really the engineer on record just gets the drawings from a Meta or a Google or one of their counterparts, which tell them what to design, how to design it. And they probably have 5 or 6 prototype designs, and now they're just choosing out of that. Now, to price that in a lump sum scenario becomes much more easier for the company when you're talking about a data center kind of design. Or even in that scenario, they typically stay away from design build. You would go in on a fee and GC basis and then build it and give them the final number eventually. So definitely, I feel, every sector has its own nuances and different types of project sizes. Lump sum might work for a small job, which has very less risks compared to a project where you go in, which might be a greenfield site. And now you got to do a bunch of things starting from just site work excavation, geotech reports, and lo and behold, you get surprises on what you really bought out. So definitely I would say like those are all factors. At the end of the day, irrespective of my sector, you know, what we deliver to the client is based on our transparency and how we are communicating with the client. A lot of times we say, "Hey, we told them, that floor has not been designed properly." Yes, we told them, but did they hear you? Like, did they understand what you were trying to tell them? That's a lot of times that's the disconnect, right? We
Yeah.
think we've told them, they think we've not told them because the way we said it or the way they heard it did not align. And so, irrespective of the sector, I always say, like, at the end of the day, that transparency and that clarity with which you communicate and you check with the client that they have actually heard what you've said is very important. And that's the common thread, no matter which sector, no matter what size of project you're doing, like that makes or breaks your projects.
Yeah. So I think this comes up a lot, especially in the construction industry, is enhancing and optimizing that vendor communication and making sure that there's not a lot of wasted time, which, as you know better than I do, there already is a lot of wasted time with repetitive communication, people not reading the bids or the plan or the design documents or what have you. How are you as a leader in this space overcoming some of those nuances and some of those shortcomings that create delays? They create inefficiencies in the productivity of the projects that you're overseeing. I mean, you just spelled it out for us right there, in terms of a very real reality that is in one way or another, and you can keep me honest here, inevitable, for some of these larger scale projects that especially companies like Gilbane are working on and that you're controlling the destiny of. But how are you, Sue, as a leader, trying to optimize or alleviate some of the delays or inefficiencies that come with some of those lapses in communication, for example, which could lead to much bigger delays if, completed, oh, you guys put the wrong flooring down and you're done. I mean, now we have to pull it back up. It's going to cost us 8 weeks and who knows how many dollars. Talk to us a little bit about that and how you're overcoming or challenging some of those issues that happen so often.
All right, so I'll give you two examples, and then I'll talk about, there are two examples, and then there's a solution based on technology, and then there's a solution based on people, right? Both together will solve the problem for us. Now, from the perspective of, one of the issues that I faced in a past project, I had no idea, but there were things shown in the drawings, and we assumed that whatever showed up in the drawings was part of what the owner wanted, right? So as soon as we got the set of drawings, and this is a project which was in construction, and it was hot and heavy in construction, so not in precon. However, as a project manager at that time, I was like, okay, we need to price it. We need to tell the client this is what it'll cost. So when we went back to the client on those set of drawings and told him, hey, this is what it costs, he said, what are you pricing? And then we showed them the drawings. Turns out the client did not know that that particular thing had made it into their drawings. And they said, well, we didn't know. Maybe that user group wanted it, so they ended up putting it in because of, the chain with which, the chain of, I don't know, command, but how the drawings show up in the set, right? And we said, well, our team is ready to do this work because we're already here and we're working in that area. Do you want us to build per this set or the previous set? And they said, no, stop. We need to figure this out, right? So what I realized was that a lot of times there are situations where the client does not know what's in the drawings. And it's our job as a team to educate them and say, hey, this might have been something you were deciding on, but I don't think it was clear whether it needed to make itself into the drawings. And whether it's the designer or the contractor, if we all are told to stop, then it's lost for everybody, irrespective of, the paperwork and the trail and the momentum on the project.
Totally.
Because
Yeah.
the morale goes down a lot when you tell somebody to stop work, right?
Yeah.
So with that in mind, in my future projects, right, what we did was, it's a very timely example where we went in and we used software, collaborative design, project management software like Join, and we would pull up everything that changed from the drawings, from the old drawings to the new set of drawings, everything that was making its way into the new set of drawings in that log, where it would say, okay, this was wood, now this has turned into metal panels. Here's the cost for the metal panels. Owner, do you agree? Owner says, yes, we want metal panels in lieu of wood. And then we would make its way, and then we would say approve to document. And that was the tickler for the architect to go put it in the drawings. But
So,
do we be able? Yeah.
sorry to interrupt, but how in the first place did these elements of the design of the takeoff drawings or the design documents, how did the incorrect components get in there in the first place? Is it just because it's passing through so many hands that it just finds its way in there? Was it user error? Was it a, technological error? I mean, how did that even happen? Because you guys are receiving it from the owner. It's like, okay, we're going to go price this. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously, why would we receive this just to go back and say, hey, does this look good? It's like, yeah, I'm the one who sent it to you. But then, lo and behold, we had problems anyway. So how did that even
So
happen?
yeah, so it's interesting because in that case, right, as you work on a project for many years, the command, the chain of command kind of
Yeah.
changes in the sense that the architects start sending things directly to the contractor, right?
Mm,
And so the architects are sending us these drawings and telling us, hey, this is the latest set, right? And in healthcare construction, you do ACDs and SIs. So they've gone as far as getting it approved through the HCI or OSHPOD at that time. And we used to get those drawings from them. Now, the issue was that the architects sometimes work with the user groups of the hospital that we are building, for example. And so if there is no strict chain of authority on who is the decision maker, then as a project architect, you go in and sit in a room, the users say, hey, I need alcoves every 15 feet or something like that. And those alcoves show up in the drawing. And because in that meeting, somebody said we need alcoves every 15 feet. Now, some clients, very sophisticated clients, have filter, you could say, that person who acts as a filter to that requirement and questions their own team members and says, hey, why are you asking for 15 alcoves every 15 feet? And maybe the person defends it, but this other person has the knowledge, say the nursing knowledge, to say, hey, that's not per code. That's not needed per nursing code. Is this a nice to have? Oh, this is a nice to have. Then let's see if your department has the budget to support this change in the drawings. So you need to have that structure on the client side to make sure they are making those decisions and it filters down on their side so that those alcoves don't show up in the drawings. And
right.
somebody has to say no. So architects are trying to please their clients, and it's very tough for them to say, no, that's not in the original budget. That's not in the original design. We cannot do this. So nowadays on bigger jobs, you have people that belong to the owner who do that work of saying, no, no, dear, you can't have this. This is not part of the plan.
Or you have to be ready to shell out another 3 million bucks, for example, if this is something you really, really want, for example,
Yeah.
because it's not it's Gilbane's job to basically say, okay, we can do this, but the architect is really representing the owner, for example, and then you guys are really going out and hiring the subs to go and carry out the jobs and oversee the completion of the project. So it's not your job essentially to go back and say, hey, this looks wrong. If it ends up on your desk, it's like, what are we supposed to assume? This is what you sent us. We didn't draw it. We're not the architects, right?
And I think that's where it's interesting because the old sort of contracting style would be that where you, like me as the contractor, would be like, "Ooh, that's too bad, right?" But now with the IFOA and the IPD structures where we as the contractor are in bed with the client, the main subcontractors, the design team, it's like a 13 or 12 party agreement So all of us lose together or win together. In those situations, the mindset is, hey, if they lose, we lose. If we lose, they lose. So we all got to be in it together to win it. Otherwise, it's not going to work. So in that contracting methodology, you can actually make that happen and have that conversation where in the meeting I can say, hey, owner, did you look at those drawings? I see some things that I did never price to begin with. They're like, oh, show me what's in there, right? And then the architect and the owner and us work together to get there. In the older methodology or the mindset that we had, this would not have worked, right? In the older,
Yeah.
because at the end of the day, it's the contract that governs how we behave on the job. There are clients in the Bay Area that work with the typical like GMP style, traditional GMP design build contract, but they will put in the contractual verbiage that you need to work like an IPD or an IFOA form of contract because we want everybody to hold hands and kumbaya all the time.
And sing
that
kumbaya, yeah. I was
you
gonna
know,
say.
so
Yeah, because it
so
sounds like, it's there's not a win-lose. It's either you win-win or you lose-lose. There's no in between.
yeah, and no longer, right? I mean, the way the contracts are written these days, and we want to work with the same client again and again and again.
Yeah.
So if we want to work with them again, and most of the times the architects we work with, I worked with so many of them 10 years ago, and I'm still happening to work with them no matter which firm I'm with, like with GC I'm with, right? So it is that same set of people that we come across. And one of the things I have learned is you never burn bridges. These are the same set of people that you go build whatever you feel like in the next 20 years. So it's important for us to have each other's back and make it all happen and help the team get better at it. I think the software has changed quite a bit over the last 15 years. So we are able to do a lot more easily, right? Than I could communicate that same thing 10 years ago and it would be a boring spreadsheet. And now it's something that people actually want to look at.
Well, yeah, and there's a new element or innovation of let's just start with something simple, visibility. You have 14 different parties involved, maybe including the owner, and you are saying now we just go through a few step process and it's like, hey, owner asked for this, architect signed off on this, Gilbane, do you agree? Okay, like it's in the drawings now, and we have sign off from, the important parties involved. Whereas, like you said, 10, 15 years ago, it's like, are we making a call? Oh, this guy's not available. Are we sure this is okay? I mean, and again, you know this better than I do, but just much simpler now, increased visibility, increased efficiency, and everything is more streamlined to what is going on, what are the facts, and what actually needs to be discussed. Because at this stage, as you said, unless every single party is winning, then it's going to be a loss, which we really can't afford to have, nor do we want. Which brings me to kind of my next question, Sue, and what I wanted to ask you to elaborate on further is strategy in maintaining those long, strong relationships with the subs and the suppliers. You've been doing this for a long time. You've obviously seen a ton of success throughout your career thus far, and obviously still going. What strategies are you employing personally when there's such an importance on the relationship with these guys, the 13, 14 plus other parties involved in these projects, to make sure that ultimately that you're winning most of the time as opposed to an entire, sunken ship, if you will?
Yeah. So, as far as subcontractors and trade partners, it's been what, 15 years I've been out here, and I have learned a lot from my trade partners. Let me tell you this, when I was in the industry as a field engineer on my first or second day at work in Salinas, I did not know what stud framing was. Like, I knew the term, but I didn't really understand it because I had never built anything at that point of time in my life. And coming from India, the way we build there and the way we build here is really different, right? And so turns out, the framer with that subcontractor who taught me about CH studs and metal framing studs and the different types of wall types. And I actually then started doing in-wall inspections and checking that the backing is correct. these guys all did really well, and they all ended up being really important pre-construction people in their companies at this time, and they're a text away for me.
Yeah,
And they know Sue when she didn't know anything, and they know Sue now. And those relationships are here to stay.
that's
And
huge.
and it's amazing because I'll tell you, I joined Gilbane a couple of months ago, and I have had trade partners come by and say hello to our team here. And I probably in 3 months, there were approximately 60 trades that went through the doors here. And I had stacked it up because many of them I had not met in a while. And there are people who are like, hey, I know Sue, like when she was learning how to do her first estimate, right? And I had those relationships that were, even whether I worked with those subs or not, I would call them on and off, and I would see a tricky detail on a drawing. Or I would see something that the owner wants to do, and I'm like, I'm not sure. And the best part about this industry is if you know you're not the expert, but you know who the experts are, then you can do whatever it takes to make that project happen, right?
Yeah,
And
no
that's
one's going to
something
get
that,
mad at you for calling them and saying, "Hey, I have a question." And not only it's a learning experience because they're happy to help. You're establishing some rapport by having a conversation with them. And then you're not just assuming, because in construction, we don't assume. That's not a thing. You're asking for failure at that point. So, to your point, and where I assume you're going with this, and I apologize for interrupting, but it's a win-win-win. You establish some rapport, you learn something, and you're able to avoid a catastrophe essentially by just picking up the phone and making the call.
yeah, and if you are humble, and I am humble as far as knowing what I don't know, I
Sure.
will make that call. And people love to teach. Everybody loves to teach you what they know best. And so it's our loss if I don't make that call and find out something about a new product that's in the market that I can help my new client with or my next client with, because I can find that information for them and then, tell them, hey, this is what's out there right now, solving that same problem we were talking about, right? And that developing that trade relationship and that partnership goes a long, long way, right? And that's where I feel because you have that relationship, if a project is not going well, or you wanted to call somebody into the office and say, hey, your crew has not been doing a great job. You guys need to bump up the productivity or add 6 more people to your current crew size. What can you do so we can meet our deadlines? You can have that honest conversation without citing a contract term or contract clause, because the contract clauses only take you so far, right? But if you have the relationship, somebody's going to do something about it before you go to talk contract, right? So that is where my head is always at, is how to be successful on jobs or do good pre-construction, or even when the projects are in construction, how to help the team. Because if we have a relationship with the subcontractors, everybody goes above and beyond and they don't wait to be told, right? So that's my take on trade
Totally.
partners.
Yeah. So, I mean, a tale as old as time, just relationship building and establishing, that rapport early on. Luckily for you, you've been in the industry for a while and they remember, I think that's great. They remember you back from when you were doing your first estimate. Now you're a director at a huge construction company. And it's like, wow, look, where's the time gone? And look what it's done for all of us. But what about when you need to call on a sub who you don't have as good of a relationship with? Maybe, you're getting killed on lead times. You're on plan E, F, and G, for example. What does that look like for you, especially during like the bidding process? We need to get this priced ASAP. All my go-tos with all the things that can potentially happen in supply chain. Um, what does that look like for you that maybe interacting or dealing with those vendors who you don't have as good of a relationship with?
So I think from the perspective of getting bids, for example, like say I don't have coverage and I need to do that, I'm really prompt with making phone calls. I don't talk through emails, right?
Yeah.
Phone calls, lunch, or coffee is typically my preferred method of talking to people. And especially if I need somebody to like get on board with me and, hey, can you help us out here, right? sometimes I'll make a phone call and I'll tell the guy, like, hey, I have three other bidders, but I need four bids. Can you help us out here? Yeah, maybe you can even win the job, but it's something that I need right now because the client wants four bids. So the subcontractor community, I will tell you one thing, if you call them and if you call the right person and you tell them your problem, they will listen.
Yeah.
Now, it could be, Michael, that I've been in the Bay Area and I'm so used to the people out here and people are used to working with me that sometimes I can be a bully, maybe. And that's where I stop short and I'm like, okay, I'm not going to tell them what to do, but I will tell them how to do it.
Yeah.
And
Well, we have to do
so,
it right. Someone's got to do it.
yeah. And so it turns out that, back in the day, maybe I had the problem of trying to get people and trying to get that bid coverage or trying to tell them, hey, the tariffs are hitting. What do you think is happening? But people are very willing to share. I also think the market is such that everybody's hungry for work. So,
Yeah.
it's very different than I think, 5 years ago, before COVID, I would say, where all the subcontractors had more of a pull. And after COVID, the times have changed and the waves have changed, and everybody wants work. And it is very rare nowadays that I see somebody say, "Oh, we're so busy, we cannot help you," right? And even if they do, they will give me alternates and say, "Why don't you reach out to these three guys? I know these guys. Tell them, I told you to call them." Sometimes electricians they're super busy, like union electricians, for example. And so we got to work our way through that and make that happen. And so our contacts will get us the other contacts to help us out. And it'll work through that, I don't know what do you call that, but it'll work through that chain, right? Everybody knows everybody, and then the people who know the right contacts will get you connected. So I really think like picking up the phone, talking to somebody, 9 out of 10 times can change their mind and they will help out because they know like they need to bid work, right? But being honest about, what is the chance of them winning the actual work, that is important for me to be candid with them about that because that helps them understand the time that they need to invest in it, the time that they need to take to do it, and then the future projects that they might end up bidding with us. So that, I think that answers your question.
Yeah, absolutely. And such a simple yet really powerful concept. My dad was kind of telling me the same thing a few days ago about something obviously different. But it's just pick up the phone and call them. Don't send an email. Just pick up the phone and just knock it out. Then they can hear your voice. They can understand. You're establishing the rapport. It seems so simple and elementary, if you will, but it has such a more impactful effect when you're trying to get something done. I mean, you're calling them because you need something from them, usually urgently. And it's like, yeah, you could send the email and sit around and wait for 48 hours for them to maybe respond and then send them another email. And by the time you've had a whole conversation, it's been a whole business week, or you could have knocked it out in 5 minutes in real time. And it just makes a big difference because then if it works out, you can call them next time too, and you've already established that relationship and you can add, a new vendor or sub to your arsenal, if you will, and you're establishing your network, which it seems like in your world, especially, your network can really make or break a job, especially when you're scrambling.
Yeah, yeah. And one of the things I was telling one of our junior precon engineers here was, hey, if you don't get that person on their building connected or whatever, like the contact, go up one more level, go to their website, call their front
Yeah,
desk and say, hey, I'm not able to reach this person. Who else can I talk to? If you're desperate enough, you need to make 3 or 4 phone calls till you talk to the right person,
totally.
right? Because maybe the president is too busy. Then you find their estimating manager or their chief estimator, and then you try to get their most, popular PX that other people might have worked with. And then you get a project manager. So you figure out which way you go. Either go from PM to PX to chief estimator to president or go the other direction, right? You got to make enough noise so they know that you really need to connect with them.
Yeah,
And then somebody will call you back if,
someone will call you back if if you're being aggressive enough and you do make that have that impact that we're discussing. you
Yeah. I
maybe it
don't call
takes
it
five, six
aggressive
voicemails.
anymore.
Yeah.
Michael, I don't call it aggressive anymore. I just say determined.
Yeah, fair. No, I agree with you. No, I think it's a great point. And like, I'm sorry, I just have a job to do. I need to figure this out. Like I need somebody to call me back. I'm sorry. That it's
Yep.
just as simple as that.
Yep.
Yeah,
That's
determined.
funny.
I think that's a better word for it as well, but accomplishing the same thing at the end of the day.
Yep. Yeah.
Sue, we touched on this briefly earlier. Want to dive a little bit deeper into this too, technology. And how has it transformed pre-construction planning in recent years? Obviously, there's been a specific amount of innovation or significant amount of innovation, I should say, the last few. What impact has that had on your world in pre-con, and how have you been utilizing technology now, given the capabilities can, as we've discussed, really enhance and optimize some of the efficiencies that go into project planning and what you're working on in the day to day?
Yeah. So, couple of different things, right? In pre-construction, pre-construction is not just estimating, it's also planning and phasing the projects. There is software that helps enhance, I mentioned Join earlier, there's Concentric, there's Edify, there is a bunch of others that do the estimating, cost modeling, and TBD portion of the costing part of the pre-construction. However, there's also other things like Planera and a few others that do like the scheduling portion of pre-construction. And those softwares help you with the visualization of the schedule, right? We have Loss Planner system and a few others also that people use. And it's all about the visual communication that helps the client understand really what the superintendent means when he says, FDOB, which might be the first day of business in some industries, right? And then you have substantial completion and staffing and stocking when it comes to healthcare, right? So different industries have different nomenclatures. With it becoming visual, it becomes a lot more easy for the client to understand, oh, I need to get my staff 1 month before in here so that they can start doing their part. Because for the final inspection, we need all the lab equipment set up, or we need the other things that the client plans to do, like the furniture, all mounted and everything done in their space. And it helps in all of that communication. And I'm really talking about like understanding the whole picture, right? Right from the day of mobilization all the way to the end. But doing that upfront during pre-construction sets the stage correctly so that the client understands, hey, these are some of the things I need to work on. And maybe it's his audio visual contract that he needs to give to his vendors so that we can have them on time, plugging in everything, hooking up the TVs and all the other stuff in the space in a timely manner. Now, that's one part of it where the visual nature of this helps with the planning. Then in our estimate, for example, we always have inclusions and exclusions and all that other stuff, right? A lot of times the client doesn't read it till we show it to them eventually during the course of the project that, hey, we excluded this, right? But having it visually also tells them that, hey, the furniture, the AV cabling, the network low voltage cabling, all of that is part of the client's bucket of money. And the client is managing that. And we are not managing it. And having that visual pie chart that shows you, we have mechanical, electrical, plumbing, we have all our finishes, and then there's a bunch of grayed out stuff that belongs to the client, makes the client think about it, talk about it, and get his procurement group on those things so that push comes to shove when it's time for finishing design, we have the necessary input from their vendors, right? So that is really how I feel at a high level technology has changed the game because the clients are now a lot more um, educated about what's going on.
And what
And
things
they
will
all,
look like and whatnot,
Mhm.
which is, I
And
mean, huge part of it, I would imagine. I've never built a building or owned a building, but I would imagine kind of getting an idea as to what it's going to look like on the inside, what it's going to look like on the outside with, these design docs and the CADs and everything else versus, 40 years ago when it's like, I hope it looks the way I'm picturing it, but no one will know until it's done kind of thing. It makes a big difference
Yeah.
for
And
starters.
and yep. And you also have the augmented reality and a bunch of
Oh,
other
yeah,
tools that architects and designers use for space planning, right? Or the clients go in and they look in and they understand all that for them to understand it. Now what happens is I'll give you a good example, right? If somebody shows you a complicated spreadsheet that you don't understand anything or you are like too lazy to actually read it, so you're like, okay, fine, okay, this looks good, go for it. Now, if I show you something that is visual, nice to look at, what's going to happen is now Michael is going to look at it and then he's going to start asking questions. He's going to ask questions because he kind of figures like he can understand some of the stuff. So then the chances that he will be like, oh, I never knew about this goes down because you actually kind of now started looking at it, started asking questions. I started answering some questions. And so now you are more into the weeds of it than being like, oh, yeah, that's fine. That spreadsheet looks complicated. I'm not going to ask anything because, I have to first study it before I can ask questions, right?
yeah,
And so that has changed, right? Because we are being more visual, we are being more transparent, we are showing the information in a way that anybody who looks at it with a non-construction background also gets it.
totally.
We are being asked more questions. And that kind of leads to the chain of no surprises in the future because everybody gets it on the team. So
Everyone's on the same page right away, on time, and these questions aren't being asked 3 weeks late after, a whole wing of the building goes up, and then it's like, wait, I thought it was going to look completely different, for example. It's like, nope, everyone's on the same page. Everyone has some sort of scope, regardless of your experience or your skill level or ability to interpret some of these documents. It's like, okay, what do you think? Any questions? Happy to discuss it. Everything looks good. Cool. We can move on. And I think
yep.
that's a huge difference maker and something that probably wasn't available to have it to, especially there wasn't access to this element within those conversations, what, 10 years ago, less? It's
Hmm.
huge. It's a huge difference maker, obviously.
Yep.
Awesome. Well, and Sue, last question for you before I let you go here. We've gone over a lot. You've seen a lot of success, in your time within the industry, I should say. Put up a lot of buildings and have obviously learned a ton during your time here within the precon and just regular construction industry as a whole, obviously. You sprinkle in some engineering in there as well. I mean, it's, a whole career. For somebody listening who maybe is coming out of college who would want to follow in similar footsteps to you, what would you tell them? What advice would you provide to say, man, I kind of like Sue's career path. I like everything that you've discussed today. What would you tell them, 22-year-old kid coming out of school today?
I would tell them, go get your hands dirty, go build something for real. And once you do that, then come into the office and solve whatever problem you felt you should be solving during your time out in the field. If you didn't like something about the way the safety was done, if you didn't like the quality program, if you didn't like how the schedule was being inefficient versus you might have had a better idea, then come into the office and solve those problems. And I am more than happy for you to come solve problems during buyout and pre-construction, or, there are a myriad of things that people can do once you're on the job site. And that would be my, advice is go get dirty. Because if you don't get your hands wet out there and do a bunch of work, then you wouldn't really know what construction means when you are in the office. And I think that really makes or breaks who we are. So there
Yeah.
you go.
No, I couldn't agree more. And being able to speak to those experiences as opposed to sitting in the boardroom, for example, and it's like, I think this is what you should be doing. I don't actually know because I've never actually picked up a shovel or never ever, had calluses on my hands from working in the field all day. But it's a big difference when you have and you can speak to it and bend boots on the ground, if you will, in terms of your development. Even when you get to the point when you trade in the working boots for dress shoes, for example, at least you've had that experience in the field and you can speak to it forever, which is super valuable, especially as you progress throughout your career, right?
Yep.
Awesome. Sue, thank you so much. This has been terrific. Really, really appreciate the time today and for you willing to share these insights. A ton of really, really valuable takeaways, of course. I thought this was a great episode. And again, thanks so much for the time and for joining us on the Results Loading podcast.
Thank you for inviting, Michael. Appreciate
Yep.
it.
Thanks, Sue. Take care.